Hi everybody, we are back with our last of our video series in the gospel, Good News for Everyone. And today we're talking about the gospel proclaimed. Last Sunday at church at the Well, we talked about how it's important to serve other people, to love other people, to show Jesus through our actions, but that's really only half the story. And we have to be able to articulate our faith, or to be able to put why we believe in Jesus into words. Ben has a personal story about why he feels so compelled that that's the truth, and you're going to tell that to us
Sure.
now.
Yeah. So when I was, and I have a hard time remembering the exact timeline of this, but it was right toward the end of my high school career, early college career. There was some really interesting times for me in my life, just decisions I was making or not making, and but I remember I was at a fall retreat, fall church retreat with a group from my church, and I remember we were in one night we were in the middle of a worship service, and the guy had finished preaching, and then we were worshiping, and things were just I really felt like God's Spirit was moving, and I had a friend of mine who was next to me, and he said, can we talk? And so we actually left the building and went to walk around this giant circle at Camp Wesley Pines. And as we walked out the door, he just kind of laid his heart out, and he was like, he said, "Man, I'm really struggling." And I knew recently he had broken up with his girlfriend, and he was having a hard time, but I didn't realize what effect that had taken on his faith. And he began just to kind of pour his heart out, that he had kind of pretty much given up on faith, that if God loved him so much, then he wouldn't have let his girlfriend break up with him. And I remember thinking of that, and of course in my mind I'm thinking, dude, just because your girlfriend broke up with you, God still loves you. But as someone at that age, I also struggled to put into words what was going on inside of my head and my heart. And I really felt like I kind of fell flat on that opportunity. I felt like God was stirring in his life, and he was struggling with this decision he had made to kind of walk away from the faith. And I really felt in that moment that I should have and could have offered him some sort of hope, some sort of assurance, some reminder of God's love, or even just told him kind of what's going on in my own life, and maybe that would have been inspirational for him. And I just kind of missed the mark, and that was kind of a moment for me where I realized, like, I've got to, I not only have to figure out a way to articulate my own faith, but I think I need to solidify my own faith. That this was a moment where I realized that, well, if this moment pushed him to a place where he was willing to leave it all behind, what would it take for me to sort of walk away myself? And that was a real struggle with me. And so I began at that moment really trying to discern what do I believe, why do I believe it, and how do I share that with somebody else? And so I feel like God has been working on me since that moment to help develop this idea of what do you believe, why do you believe, and how can you share it with somebody else? And so yesterday when we were talking about the things that Paul said, and I'm going to read for us that passage again, if that's okay. Romans chapter 10. This is what Paul says. He says, "But how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him if they have never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? And how will anyone go and tell them without being sent? That is why the scriptures say, how beautiful are the feet of messengers who bring good news." Man, I didn't think I had very pretty feet in that moment. I didn't feel like I'd brought good news. Still don't have very pretty feet, do I?
I was trying to
Not
think of
laugh?
some way to say that, but not really.
Yeah. But I realized in that moment, especially in this encounter with my friend, that I had failed this opportunity. And so now the more I learn and receive the gospel for myself, and as it changes me, I realize there is hope, and that there is a way, but it has to be told. Like, it has to be lived out, but it also has to be articulated. And so you're going to talk to us a little bit. I know in our groups tonight, like, we want you to really wrestle with this idea of what do I believe? Why do I believe it? And how can I share that with somebody else? So you want to give us some real practical next steps, maybe?
Yeah, so a few months ago, we set out to kind of create a resource that would help people think about their journey of faith and how to tell that story. And we came up with these papers called Your Story Matters, and there's a couple different versions. There's one like this with spreadsheets for people who think like me, and we have another version that doesn't have the spreadsheets for people who think more like Ben. So we'll make both available to you so you guys can pick which one makes sense to you. But basically what we did was we thought about our own lives, thought about our own experience having to write that down and what things are important. And basically what we decided was this, is that when you look back on your life, this is not like scientific research or anything, just from our experience, but when you look back on your life, it's either something important that happened to you, so like a significant moment in your life, whether that's a positive moment or a negative moment. Maybe a positive moment would be like the birth of a child or getting married. A negative moment might be dealing with a tragedy of some sort. Somebody close to you died. You lived through Hurricane Katrina, something like that. Thinking about those big moments and also thinking about the significant relationships along the way. Who influenced you in positive or negative ways. And when you're getting all that down on paper, we kind of broke it up into age ranges. So you think about, your early life, kind of the middle of the life, and then kind of like where you are now. Breaking those down and thinking about, the 4 most significant relationships, the 4 most significant moments of those time periods, and then going back and taking a look at where was God at work in all of those spaces. And I think what you'll begin to see is that God was at work all along the way, and that he was with you all along the way, and that there's a moment where there's maybe a before and an after, and maybe you have several of those before and after moments of before I followed Jesus, I thought this way, experiences affected me this way. After I saw Jesus at work in my life changed and I became different. So there's lots of questions on these forms for you to take a look at and fill out, and we hope that you'll do that. I always feel kind of weird telling people, hey, you ought to journal about your life, or you ought to write all this stuff down. But I honestly don't know a better way to internalize that than actually, sitting down and writing it down or typing it or whatever.
Sure.
Internalizing that within yourself.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. Just, it's one thing to talk about, hey, what is my story? But to have a template and a worksheet to sort of process through that is really helpful. So I hope that you'll take time to do that in your group, or even, you may want to take it home and revisit it later. But really, I would encourage you, even around your group, to take time and just discuss, like, what do I believe? Why do I believe it? And how can I share that with somebody else?
I think what you were saying about sharing your story within your community group is really important. It was within the last couple of years that we sat with our community group and had a template that we all took home and thought about and filled out. And we came back, and for 3 or 4 weeks, we took turns with every single person in our group sharing their story. Yeah. How, the significant moments of their past, how and when they started following Jesus, sometimes even how they got to the well. And I think that those nights in our community group were really helpful to getting to know each other on a deeper level. The vulnerability that people were willing to share in that space was really good, because it helped us understand a little bit more. It helped us recognize God at work in each other's lives. Sure. It drew us closer together, I think, and closer to God as well.
Sure.
So it's something that we really want to recommend that you guys take the time to do.
Sure, and I think one thing it did that I noticed is that people in our group who didn't think they had a story, who had just thought, well, I just, kind of no major significant moments in my life, I trust God, everything's good. It helped us to realize for them and help them to realize that that God really was doing a work of transformation in their life, and their story is worth telling. And I hope that you all know that everyone has a story, and every person's story matters to God. And it is, I believe, useful to be a testament and a witness to what God can do, not only in the way that you express it in your life, but for what God can do in someone else's life. So I hope that you'll spend some time, wrestling again with sort of these 3 questions. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? And how can you share that with somebody else? So
yep.
I hope you guys have a great group tonight, and we look forward to seeing you on Sunday.